Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Afternoons on the Dove. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. But today, I have a co-host. My good buddy, Steve Best, is in the studio with us today. Steve, you hear him on the Afternoons on the Dove. And what a joy, man, to have you in the studio today.
It's good to be here. Very excited.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we have got a fun interview, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. If you are a rock star fan, we have a rock star with us today, Zoro. Perhaps you've heard of him. I would imagine you have. And he is a drummer, to say the least. And, of course, he's played with such bands as...
Well, the list is endless. Lenny Kravitz is an early influence on him. Bobby Brown, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, The New Edition, Philip Bailey, formerly with Earth, Wind and Fire, and even Lisa Marie Presley. So there's quite a rich list of artists he's played and toured with.
Now, why are you particularly interested in talking to Zoro?
Well, it's always interesting to talk to artists that are Christians who are in the mainstream of music, because it's a difficult thing to do. Musicians who are listening, they'll know that there's always this kind of question: do I stay within Christian music, or do I branch out into the mainstream? Some are in favour, some are not. So to hear from someone who's toured with all these artists and is a Christian, I think is going to be particularly interesting today.
By the way, his new book is out. We have a copy of it here, and it's called The Big Gig, The Big Picture, Thinking for Success by Zoro. So, Zoro, what a delight, my friend, to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never done this before. He is literally on Skype with us, those of you watching on the Dove TV, from a closet at a university in Nashville. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for being with us today. Now, tell people where you are and why you're in that closet.
I'm actually not in a closet. I'm in a practice room. There's a piano behind me. This is a practice room at Belmont University where I teach. And I thought you would appreciate this room as opposed to downstairs by where the drums are, because you'd be hearing drums through the entire interview.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, what a story, and what a book. What do you want folks to get from The Big Gig, Zoro? Because you talk about so many things in there. It really is an encouraging book for those who are trying to, to make it with the music industry.
Well, what I want them to get are several things. The book is 440 pages long, and there's 22 chapters, and every chapter is the art of something, beginning with the art of vision, attitude, the art of strategy, the art of learning. So there's many components to the book, but what I really want them to get is this idea that God gave me of success, which is a three-pronged thing. It's personal success, vocational success, and spiritual success. And without all three, it's not success by God's standards, because you have to flourish in all three. So the book walks you through what it takes to live out God's dream for your life, and all the multitudes of things that it takes to walk out that dream. There are many components and many pieces of a puzzle to fulfilling a dream or a call on your life. And so the book is really for anybody. It's not just for musicians. It doesn't matter what your profession is. The principles in it apply to everybody. I'm just speaking from my musical background and my experiences with achieving success in my own field.
I think the other important point to make right from the offset, Zoro, is that this, you being a drummer, but this is not just a book for drummers. You say it's not just for musicians, but within the musician genre, anyone can relate to this. So this is something that is not just a drummer's book, is it?
No, it's actually not a drum book at all. I've written 3 other drum books that were all award-winning for best educational books, but this book has nothing to do with drums whatsoever. It's for anybody who plays an instrument, but again, the principles being biblical principles and foundational principles for success apply to absolutely everybody. So it would be no different than a sports coach telling you how he had a winning team, and those principles would apply to anybody and not people who are just trying to play football.
Zoro, let's go back a little bit into your life. First of all, I did not know, and you told us before we went on the air, that you have a little bit of Southern Oregon history to you. You went to school in Grants Pass?
Yes, I'm Los Angeles originally, and we moved up to Grants Pass when I was about 10 years old. So I actually went to school, elementary school, junior high, and high school, all the way up until my last year of high school. For my senior year, we moved to Eugene, Oregon, but I went to high school there in Grants Pass at a school called Hidden Valley High School, and I went there for 3 years, and I was amongst the first students that ever went to the school when it was brand new in 1977. So yeah, I do have a history in the Rogue Valley area, and that's actually Grants Pass and Hidden Valley High School is literally where I began playing the drums for the first time.
How did you get the name Zoro?
It's just something my mother gave me. She was she was from Mexico City, and she'd always she reared me on a lot of old movies and all those classic movies from the 40s and 50s, and she used to always say, you remind me of the real Zorro from the TV, because you have a heart for the underdog, for the poor, and it was just kind of connected to my Spanish heritage, and I really look at it like God sort of renamed me that, actually.
What's great about this book, Zorro, is it's not just a how-to manual for musicians, but God is scattered all the way through it. In fact, God is central to the book. Your faith is obviously very important to you. When did you have your first encounter with God?
I would say my first encounter with the Lord was really, really young, before anybody taught me or kind of showed me the gospel or anything. I think at 6 or 7, I already just felt the presence of God. There was like a revelation that came to me when I was a little kid, and the revelation was, there is a God. And then at about 12 years old, about 12 years old, I had been going to, my mother was a woman of faith, and in California, we used to, she used to take me to the Catholic Church, as she grew up Catholic. Then when we moved to Grants Pass, we began to attend a Baptist church. And it was at that Baptist church, it was called Faith Baptist Church, and they invited us to go on one of those camping trips, they take kids on for a week. And it was at that camping trip up in Canby Grove, Oregon, that I physically received the Lord, like, in my heart. I had always felt him, I'd always believed him, but that's sort of when I made that proclamation where I walked up and they were singing, Just As I Am, the Billy Graham crusade song. Mm-hmm. And I remember going up there crying and just asking the Lord into my heart up at that camp.
Now, obviously, it's stuck very well, and faith is a central part of your life, like any Christian it would be. But how did you grow from there in your drumming career as it began to take off more into the rock and roll era? How did that all transpire in your life?
Well, there was many components of it. I mean, the initial vision and dream really started, when I was. It's funny. The things that I'm doing today are all things that were imprinted in my heart as a real little boy. I always wanted to play the drums. I always wanted to write books, and I always wanted to be a preacher and speaker. For as long as I can remember, those 3 things were like desires of my heart. And so I think that just through pursuing God and walking by faith, he sort of revealed to me each part of the journey, each piece of it that I would need to piece together. And the first being the drum career, which really started in the dream started at Hidden Valley High School in Grants Pass, and playing on stage with the stage band, and that just lit me up. And then from there, I just began to I took private drum lessons from my first drum teacher was a high school student himself. He was a senior named Eric Christensen, and I paid money that I worked for from my own day jobs for the lessons, and he got me my first start. And when I went to Eugene, Oregon for my last year of high school, I auditioned for a local band in Eugene called the Robel Brothers, and they were sort of like a family act, like the Osmond Brothers, the Jackson 5, and they were going to go down to Disneyland to audition for a house band gig there. And so that brought me down to LA, and the whole thing kind of started from there. But it was really, if I look back in my life, it's really just God's hand was on it, and God's favor was on it. And he gave me a very tenacious, kind of a bold spirit. And so I just, I don't know, to answer a question in the quickest manner, there's a Mark Twain quote I use in the book, The Big Gig. In fact, there's over 400 motivational quotes in the book, but the quote sums up my life and how I achieved anything. In the quote, it says something like, all that's needed is ignorance and confidence. And with that, success is assured.
I've got to say the book has some wonderful biographical stuff in it as well, which is really interesting. I mean, it's something I want to bring up a bit later on as well. But you've played with a huge variety of different artists, different varieties of music. One thing I do notice, though, looking at your influences when you were growing up, there was a lot of different styles of music in your house. But I really latched on to one of your early favourites, which was Edwin Starr's 25 Miles, which is about as driving a Motown beat as you can get. Is that the kind of stuff that got hold of you at that age?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Because I grew up in Los Angeles in the 60s, you know, and in South Central Los Angeles, you know, intoxicating doses of soul music. And so I basically grew up listening to all of the rhythm and blues music that was popular during the day. And so, of course, that would include, like, you know, James Brown and Motown and Aretha Franklin and the Stax record label from Memphis and all of those, and the blues artists and the gospel artists. And so I grew up listening to all of that music. And where I lived in South Central Los Angeles, I mean, it looked more like off the set of Sanford and Son. I mean, that's kind of like what the neighborhoods looked like, and music was all around me. And so, yeah, that music just, I don't know, it just permeated my soul, and I just immediately just felt in tune with the groove of that music. And then the very first concert that I'd ever attended was at about 8 or 9 years old, and we were fortunate to go see Diana Ross and the Supremes in concert with the Temptations. And a neighbor got us some tickets, and a nice, you know, neighbor lady, she drove us to the concert, me and my brothers and sisters. And watching those guys sing all of, and the Tamps and the Supremes sing all of my favorite Motown tunes, and watching them from the concert, I immediately gravitated towards watching the rhythm and the drummers. And yeah, so that music definitely, you know, kind of set the pace for the groove that would be in me.
You know, what's so interesting as you begin to progress this now, you're looking back on all this and how God, you know, obviously orchestrated every one of those steps in your life. When did the first big break come with a big band for you?
Okay, that's a good question. The very first, I mean, I guess the first real break would have been the small break that led to the big break, which was joining that group, the Robel Brothers, in Eugene. I just had graduated high school in June of 1980. I joined the band like by July, and then before the fall was out, we were already down in LA to audition for Disneyland. They had a house band gig there before, but then when we auditioned, they didn't get it the second time around. So it's very disappointing. We ended up down in LA. We didn't get the house band gig, and very shortly after, the band started to fall apart. But that brought me back to LA, where I was from. So that was the initial first thing that landed me in the right area. And then in 1983, my first real break was playing with Philip Bailey, the lead singer of Earth, Wind & Fire. Wow. And you got to understand that Earth, Wind & Fire was my absolute favorite band of all time growing up. So to be anywhere connected to those guys was like a miracle. And the way that I had gotten the opportunity was I was studying with the drummer of Earth, Wind & Fire, and he was a Christian, and so was Philip Bailey, and the drummer's name was Ralph Johnson. And Ralph, I was taking lessons from Ralph because I met him at a concert at the Roxy called Jesus at the Roxy. And it was a gospel concert featuring 4 of the members of Earth, Wind & Fire and a lot of the other top LA musicians that were also Christians. So I met Ralph there, began to study with him. After a couple of years, then he was playing on tour with Philip Bailey, and then he said, "You know what? I can't do these gigs anymore, and you're ready for this. You're right for the gig." And he told them about me. And I went in and played, and I believe I was in clearly over my head because these guys were all top-notch LA studio pros. But they liked me, and they liked my playing, and I had God's favor, and they asked me to join. So that was my first real big break that gave me the confidence.
Well, all right. We're talking to Zoro. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, by the way, if you want to join us, the number is 776-5368. Maybe you have some questions for him. And there he is, having a little coffee, a little caffeine break here. We'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Okay, we're back, and I tell you what, we're having a great time talking to really world-renowned drummer Zoro. He's authored a book called The Big Gig, and let me encourage you to get a copy of this book. And it's really a great motivational book to read. And whether you are a musician or not, I think you're going to glean a lot from this book. And get a copy of it today, put out by Alfred Press, I think it is. And I'm sure you can check out Barnes & Noble and Amazon, right? Zoro, you can get this book just about anywhere now?
Yeah, and you can get it off the website, thebiggigbook.com, and it's published by Alfred Publications, but it's also available on Amazon, and it's just beginning to get into all the Barnes & Nobles, but for sure you can get it off thebiggigbook.com at the moment.
Well, I'm going to make a little bit of an admission here. I did play the drums for a while. My problem is I couldn't hear. So I couldn't hold a beat. So anyway, I really admire anybody that can do one of those really drum solos the way you have done it. I really admire your work. It's just great. So.
I've got to tell you, Zoro, we're just looking in the book here. I mean, I'm going to read this. I haven't yet had a chance to read it cover to cover, but I am, as a former professional bass player, I'm going to be doing that, so I can guarantee it. There are some of the tips in there are just, I wish I'd known these about 10, 15 years ago. But what interests me, we were talking just before the break a little bit how you got your Philip Bailey break. There's a fascinating section in the book where you talk about another massive break for you, which was the whole New Edition experience. That was I guess the next step up from the Jacksons. I guess that's how they were touted. But that whole section where you talk about your New Edition experience, what really impressed me, and this may not be particularly apparent to people who aren't musicians, the audition business in something like that is so thorough, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, that audition, the way that audition came about was through my friend Lenny Kravitz. And Lenny was a young, hip music producer at the time. Nobody knew who he was as an artist, but he was the first guy I met when I came down to LA who really believed in me. And in fact, there's a quote when I talk about that whole story of that audition. There's a quote there from Abraham Lincoln. And I felt that same way about Lenny, but the Abraham Lincoln quote said something like, I had a friend who really believed in me, and I just didn't have the heart to let him down. And that's why he succeeded. He pushed so hard because he had a friend who believed in him. So it was the same way with me and Lenny. But yeah, when you're auditioning for a big gig like that, there's obviously a lot of competition. There's a lot of people vying for the same job, and I just kind of prayed and I said, Lord, if this is your will for me to have this gig, then allow me to do my best. And all I want at an audition is to know that I played my absolute best. If I played my best and I didn't get the gig, then I can rest in the peace of knowing it heard me at my best. But it was always terrible if you played and you didn't even play anywhere near what you're capable of, and that's what they heard. But at that particular time, just the favor of the Lord was on me, and I went in there with a real spirit of Lord, have your way. And fate would have it is that the Lord opened that door for me, and the gig was huge, and they were selling out all around the world, and they were on television shows and selling out Madison Square Garden for a week in a row, those type of things. So that really helped to establish my name and really put it on the map around the world.
Now, a lot of people will be asking the question, when you're a Christian who is active in the music mainstream, how much of an influence are you able to have on those around you vis-a-vis your faith? I mean, for instance, I've heard Lenny Kravitz is a Christian. I don't know how much chance you've had to talk to him. How free do you feel to be able to actually witness to people who are, let's put it mildly, big stars?
Well, when you're talking with me, you're dealing with a whole different kind of person. The way God wired me is I'm extremely bold, and I'm extremely passionate, and I'm extremely, with these people, genuine and enthusiastic. I never really have cared what anybody's thought. The only thing I care about is what God thinks. So I'm not asking if it's okay if I can share my faith. I'm not tiptoeing around. I'm an evangelist by nature. I'm an encourager by nature. An example would be this. You'll crack up at this story, but this is how I roll. I was on tour with Lenny Kravitz, and I've shared my faith, and Lenny and I are very close in with the Lord and with our faith, and that has always been a very close part of our relationship, the Christ part. But when I was on tour with him back in the '90s, I had bought 5,000 copies of a single book. It was a book about the end times, and I was fascinated with the end times. I was fascinated with the book, and they were having one of those blowout sales at one of those Christian distributor places. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy 5,000 copies of this book. So I bought 5,000 copies of this book, and I would pack them underneath the bay of the bus in big giant suitcases, like, duffel bags where I'd have 100 or 200 of the books with me. And everywhere I'd go and meet people, I'd share the Lord, and then I'd hand them out a book. And I eventually got rid of all 5,000 of those books while being on tour. So that's kind of how I roll. But in regards to your answer with the people in high places, is I've always shared my faith with all of the people, even people that had other faiths, or Scientologists, or Buddhists, or atheists, or whatever. But I never shared in a religious way. I've always shared it in a love of God kind of way, and I've had great reception from most people because it never came off as religious and condemning, but I've always shared it. And so it's never been a thing. It's, if you read the book, or if you YouTube me or Google Zoro the drummer, everything you're going to trace in my life, you're going to see that the Lord is declared in all of it. Because I'm not afraid, I'm not ashamed, and that's just the way God made me. He made me bold. But I've been effective at reaching and connecting a lot of people to the Lord because I just come to them in a way of just love. I don't come to them in a religious way.
Zoro, the profession that God has you in, and of course, even your background, how did you handle temptation? I mean, the life of a musician on the road can get pretty rugged. And you hear the stories of how things happen with drugs and sex and rock and roll and all of that. How did you handle temptation?
Well, first of all, I grew up extremely poor. And, my family, I was raised by a single mother who raised 7 children on her own. So we grew up with, economically impoverished, and money was something that was very, very hard to come by. So at a very early age, from the age of 10, I was already working. I was already learning to sell things, and greeting cards and YMCA peanuts, and always had jobs. And if I wanted to buy anything, I had to figure out a way to get it. So that being said, the appeal for drugs and drinking is something that honestly never appealed to me. That wasn't even a temptation, because I could never see spending my hard-earned money on something that would either go up my nose or disappear in a half an hour. I was buying records. I was paying for drum lessons. I was trying to save money for a car, for a house. So to me, the idea of squandering something that I worked so hard to earn just seemed to be ludicrous and idiotic. So that particular type of temptation never bothered me. Whereas with other people, maybe it was, and part of it was because I had a very strong mother, very strong love with her, relationship with her, and I guess she allowed me to be confident in who I was, that I didn't feel like I needed to do any of those things to be accepted. In other words, she made me feel like I was great the way I was, and I realized that a lot of people, when they party and get into drugs and drinking, they're just trying to mask something, or they don't feel confident with who they are and they want to fit in, and I just was fine with who I was.
Connected to that last question, Zoro, any musician who is a Christian, whether they're in the mainstream or in the Christian subculture, however you want to describe it, will say that carving out time with God when they're on the road is a very, very difficult thing to do. As someone who's traveled extensively like yourself, how have you dealt with that situation?
Well, over the years, my faith has grown. The years that I would have been not as on fire would have been in the very, very early 20s, still believing, but this is in the beginning stages of getting these big gigs and kind of seeing, what the world had to offer. And when you're young and you're looking at the world and it's exciting and you're going, man, I want to do that. I want to be a rock star. I want to be on TV. I want people to like me. And you're inquiring about all that. I guess early on, having those experiences, it didn't take but a couple of years of wandering to where I realized life without God is about nothing. It's about emptiness. And so I began to meet many, many famous people, billionaires and millionaires, actors, supermodels, business moguls, and giants by the world standards. And then when I met so many of them and would see that they were completely discontented and unhappy and not satisfied, I'm thinking, gosh, they've got all the money, they've got all the power, they've got the name, they've got fame, and why are they still unhappy? And it went back to that thing where the Lord said, because they don't have me. And so I realized that, even though in the early stages I thought that I wanted all that stuff, and I saw these people have it and they weren't happy, I thought, I got to return back to the Lord. So as I rededicated my life back to the Lord in my mid to late 20s, then from that point, my faith with the Lord was like an internet stock that continued to multiply and grow with each passing year. So my desire to want to know God and to walk with God just increased. And it's one of those things I teach people. Whatever you feed yourself is what you develop an appetite for. So if you feed yourself the flesh, you'll develop an appetite for the flesh. If you feed yourself the Spirit, you crave more of the Spirit. So I began to feed myself more of the Spirit, and it's grown and grown and grown to where I'm communing with God constantly, all the time. It's not like, oh, I'm putting this 10 minutes aside. He's in everything that I do, every thought that I do. He's connected to me. He's knitted in my spirit.
That's wonderful. Zoro, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, we got a few more questions. We're talking to Zoro today. He's the author of The Big Gig, which is a book I think you'll find to be tremendously encouraging. That's him. If you're listening on the radio, watching on TV, those drums you hear in the background, this is a guy having a caffeine moment. We'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Well, we're having a great time today, and what an honor for us to be talking to Zoro. And you probably know who he is. He certainly is a famous drummer and has worked with a lot of very big bands through the years. And now he's really doing the love of his life, and that is teaching drums. But he's authored a couple of books, and the one that we're talking about today is The Big Gig, Big Picture Thinking for Success. And let me encourage you to get this book, whether you're a musician or not, just a person trying to put it all together. This book is a tremendous resource of encouragement. And you can go, is it called Big Gig dot what?
The website is thebiggigbook.com.
Oh, biggigbooks.com. All right, go there and get it. And I got a couple of questions, and I want to come back to the book. But my next question is this. With your experiences, Zoro, have you had a chance to lead any notables to the Lord with your experience?
Lead any what?
Any, say, people of fame to the Lord?
Oh, many. And they'll all remain nameless so that the Lord can continue to use me in that environment.
Good for you.
Yeah, I've led many famous people to the Lord, but the Lord definitely let me know that a lot of those people live with high walls of protection for the various reasons that people always expose all of their business. And I made a promise to the Lord that, bring me the biggest people in the world you want, and I'll keep it between you and I, so that they don't feel violated, and so that they can remain vulnerable to my input in their life.
That's wonderful, and that's to be respected. In your book, you deal with what you call the pyramid power, desire, faith, and action. Give us a little synopsis of that.
Well, to me, it's like God gave us free will, and God gave us, and he never goes against that free will. So in order to achieve the vision that he gives you for your life, it all starts with desire. It all starts with you wanting to fulfill that vision. And then, it takes faith to then move forward, which then causes action. So you cannot achieve any of God's plans or his will for your life without desire, without faith, and without action. In the end, you can have action and desire, but you still need faith, because there's going to be trials and tribulations and roadblocks and setbacks and temporary failures and disappointments that inevitably come. And when that comes, you'll need your faith to keep pushing through to get to that next place, or you'll give up on the vision of the dream. And to me, the saddest thing in the world is that God gives us each of us, everyone listening out there, unlimited potential for greatness at the gift he gave us, that he put in our DNA. And the saddest thing in the world is people not using any of it, squandering it, or being complacent or lazy or apathetic. There's a quote, again, I told you there's 400 motivational quotes in the book, and I've always loved the power of words. But there's a quote I really love in the book, and it says, "The rarest thing a man ever does is the best he can." And I thought that was so powerful, because we're all capable of so much more every day. And if there's a message, a central message that I preach in my life and that I try to live in my life and that I preach to the world, and that is, don't take your life for granted. Live with a spirit of excellence and give everything your all. Give God your all. Give your family your all, your vocation, your profession, your platform, your influence. End each day in utter exhaustion because you have given that day your absolute best. And that's how I live.
Psalm 37 says he'll give you the desires of your heart. And I've heard a preacher one time preach that has two meanings. One is the desire you have in your heart, whatever it is, God put it there. And then the fulfillment of that desire, he grants it. And so you're like a double winner with that scripture.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, too, it's like I've also understood that to be the right desires, because you can desire a bunch of wrong stuff, but if your desire lines up with the will of God, meaning righteous desires, you know, and in my life, you know, my prayer every day, no matter what I'm doing when I'm driving around, I'm always saying this: Lord, how would you like to use me today? Today is another day, an opportunity to be used by you. We all know the work we have to do in a given day at our jobs, with our families, but within that work is kingdom business, and there's a way to do that work that represents and glorifies the Father. So that's what I'm always praying for, are the secrets of what would you like me to do with my gifts today? You've given me a gift of speaking, writing, playing, teaching, but how exactly could it be best used for you today? And that's my prayer every single day. And as I was writing the Big Gig book, I was like, Lord, what do you want me to write? I have thousands of stories, I have thousands of experiences, but what do you want me to write today? And what do you want me to share with the people? And that's the only way I know how to submit my will to the Lord, so that my desire is his desire.
You were saying earlier, Zoro, that the chapters in the book are the art of, et cetera, et cetera. One of those is the art of networking, which kind of got me thinking about the whole subject of ego, because how can you have to push yourself forward in the music industry, otherwise you won't get anywhere? How can you do that without appearing to be arrogant? Or do you just have to have a certain level of, let's call it, arrogance to make it as a professional?
I don't think you have to be arrogant at all. To me, being bold and courageous is not being arrogant and prideful. Because in my own life, because the visions that God has given me and has spoken to my heart are so crystal clear, that gives me the confidence and the tenaciousness to go after everything, because really it's all about motive of heart. For me, I didn't write the Big Gig to sell 1 million copies and make a zillion dollars. I wrote the Big Gig because the Lord told me to, and I was compelled to. If it happens to sell 1 million copies and I make a bunch of money, that's just the gravy, but that's not the motive. So to me, it's all about the motive of the heart. So I want to climb to the top of the highest heights, because I'm not afraid of any of that success. Because if the world can have worldly successful people that lead people into hell and lead people astray and lead people awry, then why can't God have a few heroes that rise to the top but lead people to the light? People like Daniel, people like Joseph, people like Esther. And that's what I'm interested in being, and what I'm interested in raising are modern day Daniels and Josephs and Esthers, people of excellence, but people who walk with the humility of God. And so to network is really to just go and talk with people, but there's a way to be confident without being arrogant, and I don't think you have to be. In fact, I would totally advise against any form of arrogance or pride, because that's not of the Lord. But there's a difference between Daniel was confident, and Daniel was, when he decided, I'm going to pray no matter what these people tell me to do, and that's confidence in the Lord, not arrogance. And I think it's all just in the spirit of which we do things. And my motive for wanting to excel in every area of my life is simply that I will be able to reach more people. The bigger platform I have, I've already been faithful with the platform I've had for 30 years. So if he gives me more platform and more fame and more name, the only thing that's going to happen is more people are going to hear about Jesus, and I'm going to have a more powerful impact on the world. And that's all I really care about, is impacting people.
Very well said. I couldn't agree more. I like how you've also got chapters in this book which are really practical for people who want to make it in the music business. For instance, dealing with the age-old subject of finances, how you get around the problems that come up there, and also just some very simple tips. Like I love the list of tips about life on the road, about how to make sure you're not paying too much for phone calls. These are things that are often overlooked, I'm sure, in advice that's given to musicians.
Well, and one of the things is, this book is 30 years of experience of being in this industry, and it's things that, I mean, literally, this was the book I was looking for when I was 18 years old. I'd always gone into bookstores looking for how does this work? How does this work in your personal life? When you're a musician and you tour, how do you keep your marriage together? When it could be the same thing for an athlete or a traveling businessman. These principles are the same to everybody. But one of the things that I talk about, and one of the things that has helped me achieve a lot more for God and my family and my life, has been I've never been one to waste time, and idleness is what really what destroys people in jobs where they travel a lot. Is like, so I have a lot of information in there on how you make the most of time when you're traveling. Like, I wrote my first books, the Commandments of R&B Drumming books. I wrote those while I was on tour with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. I used every bit of downtime at the airport, in planes, in the hotel. We'd be playing in Las Vegas at night, and I'd sit in my pajamas all day long and just work on my books until showtime. I didn't go wasting my time. And so I'm always thinking, and I got a quote in the book too about time. It says, I have a lot of quotes about utilizing your time wisely, but one of them goes something like, the best thing to do is break down your life into 10-minute increments of time and try not to throw any of them away. So I always thought about that. Like, I got 10 minutes. I can call my friend and encourage them. I can talk to my children and let them know how much I love them. I can jot down some ideas for the book. I don't waste time, because I realize that our life is a limited time offer. It has an expiration date. God has an expiration date on our life, and I don't want to squander any of it. I want to use all of it to be as productive as possible. So those are the kinds of things I kind of share with people to just inspire them.
Very intriguing. Hey, how was your time with Joyce Myers on her show? How'd you enjoy that?
Fantastic. She's such a wonderful woman of God, and I think she has such a big ministry just because she's just a real person. She talks like a regular person. She doesn't talk like some, super clever person who's gone to 15 years of school. She just talks like a regular person, and I believe that's what people relate to most. And she's been very supportive of everything that I've done since I've met her. In fact, she endorsed the book, and on the back of the book is a quote from her, which I consider that to be a great honor. But we hit it off great. I did 2 episodes with her, and the show went well. And then they also had me write articles for her magazine, the Enjoying Everyday Life magazine. So she's been a wonderful person to know.
Now, I realize this might turn out to be an impossible question for you to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As we've been saying, there's so much advice in this book from years of your experience. If you had like 30 seconds to give one piece of advice to somebody, what would be the most important thing you could advise someone who wants to make it in the music business?
Or just let's rephrase it to make it in life, period, because it would be all the same advice.
Sure.
I would say this. Number one, God supernaturally created you and wired you with a gift that's in your DNA, that you have an extraordinary gift that may seem ordinary, but if you work it and you are diligent, with God's help, you can turn that into something extraordinary. I would say to them, you will be held accountable at the end of your days when you sit in front of God as to whether you use that gift or not. And I would say to begin to think of your life from an eternal perspective. Every day I'm thinking about eternity, which is why I'm trying to make the most count here. I'm trying to reach as many people as I can with a positive message. And I would say that everybody has a platform. Everybody has something to give, and everybody has a life of which they can impact others with. And if you're not doing that, you're missing out on the whole point of life. I would say to everybody that God has a dream in your heart, but you have to learn how to protect that dream and how to fight for that dream and how to work for that dream. It is a God dream, but you've got to realize that to fulfill God's dream, you'll have to fight all of the enemies off. And the enemy wants to keep you from ever fulfilling God's purpose. So you have to learn to fight. The reason why I have the strength to fight is because I realize that many lives are at stake. Millions of lives are at stake if I don't write the books, if I don't speak on these TV shows, if I don't encourage people. Many people's lives will be different. So if you can view your life like George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life in the movie, and realize that every life impacts so many others if you take it seriously, and just rise up and be who God created you to be, and have confidence that with him, all those things are possible, and have confidence that he already knows and loves you. And if you're approved by God, you don't need anyone else.
Zoro, got to go. Thanks, friend. Will you come back sometime?
I would love to come back. This has been a great honor. Thank you guys so much for the privilege.
God bless you.
Thank you, Zoro.
Our prayers are with you, my friend, that God just continue to use you in a mighty way. Thanks for being with us today. Zoro with us.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. It's called The Big Gig. Get a copy of it. You can go to biggigbooks.com and get it there. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.